Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator. We've all been dealing with life in a little bit of a different way lately. And one of the people that we've taken a second or a third or even a fourth or fifth look at are the teachers in our communities. You've all heard the saying, "Oh no, that's not my child doing that." Nah, my child wouldn't be doing that at school, not that way. But since your child has been home with you during this pandemic, you see the actual reality of what it takes to teach your child. We're going to talk to somebody today who can speak to that perspective from firsthand. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Jesse Harvey today. How you doing, Jesse?
Hey, I'm good. How you doing, Cedric?
I'm doing quite well. It's a little bit different, me calling you by your first name versus calling you Mr. Harvey, because you were one of my teachers in middle school. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm good, man. Hey, that was 20 years ago, shoot. So welcome to manhood.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I want to give people an opportunity to talk to somebody who's been on the front lines of educating young men and mentoring young men into adult men, mentoring young ladies into adult ladies, and doing everything that it took to help somebody have a successful life outcome. We already got a comment in the building. Not my son. These are the types of things that people are coming to realize. Yeah, that was your son. But before we get to that point, Jesse, I want to talk about your childhood. What was it like growing up for you?
Well, actually, I started actually on 116th in Cleveland. We lived on Dove until I was about 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the home we lived in got broken into. So when the home got broken into, that's when they went on ahead and moved us out to Warrensville. So then I went through Warrensville school system until I graduated from high school in 1989. A little bit about the community and the influence on me when I was younger is there were a whole lot of teachers in my neighborhood.
Okay.
I did see a lot of black male professionals in elementary school, in middle school, and in high school. Principals, teachers. Across the street from me was actually the gym teacher at the high school. Was a black male. He also was a former Browns player. All right, in the backfield with Jim Brown. His wife was the principal over at John F. Kennedy at the time. My next door neighbor next to her, also she was a teacher at John F. Kennedy. Both of my parents were teachers. And down the street, a few houses down the street, you had a few more adults in the neighborhood that were teachers.
Wow.
Had a big impact on us because guess what? In the summertime, you still had the watchful eye of parents watching what you were doing. And it also influenced me because I saw black males and females as professionals. It was always something from the time of second or third grade, I knew I was going to go to college. We had a certain type of peer pressure even in the neighborhood because of that. We were snatching report cards, and if you had a C on your report card, nobody wanted to play with you. So we had a reverse type of peer pressure where, everybody had they really were looking for you to be on merit row. And because of that, it kind of went on where we ended up with a neighborhood where actually 90% of the people have at least 2 degrees in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So, and it's an all black community. So, I think that's powerful. I don't know which year you were there at school with me, Cedric, but I don't know if you were there when Mr. Jolly was there.
Yes.
Mr. Shambly. So Mr. Jolly, of course, was my next door neighbor.
Okay.
And Mr. Shambly, he lived across the street from Mr. Jolly, one house down. So that means Miss Germany probably was there, who also went to high school with me, and Mr. Wolf, who was in the building. So we all grew up together. So it definitely, my parents couldn't have put me, I feel, and they couldn't have put me in a better place or a better place to grow up. I had role models, and it was a decent, middle class neighborhood.
Right. It was more than decent. It was different than what a lot of other young people grow up experiencing. And when you tell me how you grew up with teachers all around you, I'm already inspired from the very beginning of this conversation. You know, how early did you realize that you wanted to be somebody great in the world?
I had two choices of what I was going to be as an adult, and I determined that in second grade.
Wow.
And I was either going to be a doctor or a teacher, which is why I ended up teaching science. Because once I got to college, I said, I'm going to go ahead and go into education. And because I want to have that as at least I got something to fall back on if I run into a struggle or a challenge. You know, I always believed in having a backup plan. So.
And what do you think is the value of a backup plan?
The value in that was, the value in that was I was prepared, I think, for mostly anything. You know, I didn't believe in closing any avenues. You know, I went to college I went to high school with the mindset of I was going to college. So, and because I had that mindset, you know, I focused in on, you know, what I needed to do in school.
Right. Did you have any along the way?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You know, I went to Cleveland State University. And at the time when I was at Cleveland State University, they actually had a sit-in or a protest my first year there.
Why?
Because they wanted the president of the university to be removed because of discriminatory practices. You know, there was a teacher on campus where they were giving teachers failing grades that were black. All right, they were getting failing grades. Luckily, some of the students that went before me kind of gave me a heads up and got me prepared for that. So I knew it was crucial that I had a network or a family, a support structure, because that support structure, I needed it to learn how to navigate through college. So it was very important.
Right. Now, did you guys stay connected? Like the people that you grew up in your neighborhood with, did you all stay connected through school, or did y'all kind of go off and do your own thing and then reconnect?
We went to different schools, but we always came back together in the summer. Mm-hmm. So we always, you know, we kept track of each other. We did go hang out at each other's schools and universities. Mm-hmm. So we definitely kept track of each other. You know, Mr. Shanley was at Akron. I know Mr. Jolly was down at Morris Brown. We went down to Atlanta. You know, I went to Atlanta often. So we definitely stayed in contact, you know, throughout our college years. And plus, living on the same street, we always ran into each other in the summers.
Right. Now, most people who don't know out there, Jesse Harvey is a black teacher in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And Cleveland is not a very easy area to be a teacher in. In fact, it's one of those areas where you end up being more than just a teacher. You end up being a counselor. You end up being a mentor. You end up being a big brother, and just a whole host of things in addition to being a teacher. I want to know, did you and your friends, did you all plan to team together to teach our children in the community?
I made a deliberate decision to teach in Cleveland. When I first came out of college and was graduating, I was offered a position in Bedford. I was offered a position in Shaker. But you know what? I wanted to go into an area where I thought it was the greatest need. While I was at Cleveland State, I noticed one thing that bothered me. You know, I was in classes and I looked around and there was no other faces like mine in the classes. I wondered why. Okay, we all hanging out, you know, in the culture center. We playing cards, or when we got downtime. How come I don't have any classes with you guys? You know, they were all in one building, which was called the Corlett Building down at Cleveland State. Mm-hmm. And what I found was that was a building where they had remedial coursework for the kids. Things that they should have learned in high school. Of course, now they're paying college tuition dollars to learn the things that they should have not learned in high school. So that bothered me. And, you know, I looked at that and, you know, I kind of had a chip on my shoulder. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Teachers in Cleveland, they're not teaching the kids anything. So I came in, you know, with a passion, with a fire, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna turn this around and make a difference. So
I want to know, how did y'all all end up in the same building? What I'm saying for people that don't know is that this man, as well as at least 3 or 4 of people that he grew up with, ended up teaching children in the same building at the same time for years. And so, it's almost like they had their own team of educators that not only grew up together, but were working together to educate our children. And I think that that's phenomenal because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the chances of that is kind of widespread.
Well, I'm gonna take it a little further than that, Cedric. Over the time in the district, I left when Audubon closed down. I went over to AJ Rickoff, and I went over to AJ Rickoff with another person from my neighborhood that I had grown up with. So actually, through my entire teaching career, no matter what building I have been in, I have been with somebody that I grew up with that was on my street, where we've known each other since kids. So my entire 26-year career, I've had actually that type of support structure. And what we were trying to do, how did it happen? I actually brought Mr. Shambly and Mr. Jolly over to the building, as well as Mr. Ward, because I saw a need. I really wanted to help get the school kind of turned around, because at the time there was a lot of things going on at the school where it kind of had, prior to you all getting there, because I remember your class and it was a very good class, but prior to you guys getting there, it was rough. Audubon was actually the reason why they went to a K-8 model in Cleveland Metropolitan School District, because of the violence that was going on in the building.
Right.
So I brought them over because I felt like, hey, the kids need more support. They need people that's going to invest in them. I know who you all are because we have grown up together. Let's go in here, and make a difference. And
can you talk about some of the dysfunction that you're seeing happening at Audubon Middle School, including, let's say, what did a dysfunctional day look like in Audubon? What did you see the students doing? What did the hallways look like? What was happening in the bathroom? Let our viewers taste and see and feel a day in Audubon.
All right. I remember there was a teacher above me, and the teacher above me, we would be in class. I was teaching, of course, science at the time. And you would just hear the stumping. You would hear the desk moving. You would hear chairs sliding. Actually, one year, what was constantly done during this class period is the kids would take all their textbooks and throw them out the window. So you see all the papers coming out the window, all the textbooks coming out the window. Then you would hear all the kids get up, run down the stairs, go outside, get their textbooks and everything, go back up into the class, one after another, maybe 15 kids at a time. After they got back into the classroom, the next thing that went out was their notebooks. They all got back up, ran back outside, got their notebooks. Then you started seeing chairs, desks, and I was constantly, kids kept, asking me, Mr. Harvey, I know you see that. And of course, I pretended as if I saw none of it, and tried to keep them engaged, and learning, because that's what I was there for. When I first got to the building that first year, you had a lot of overage kids in the building. Because it was a middle school. It was a 6th through 8th grade. And you had several kids in the building that were 18 years of age. So you had a lot of people. Excuse me? I didn't hear you.
You said that the kids were routinely throwing their textbooks out the window. Now, could this be seen as people was driving by?
Oh, I'm sure they had to see it. They had to see it. I mean, there was no way you could miss it. Actually, when I got hired like the second week of the school year, the year I was hired. And I was the 6th teacher hired in that 2-week period. I know the teacher before me, they had took his desk and thrown it down the hallway and his briefcase and everything else. So I knew it was going to be a challenge. My father being a teacher in Cleveland public schools as well, when he heard that I was going to Audubon, he was like, oh man, they couldn't send you anywhere else. So, and I mean, that was what I came into. The hallways, kids not going to class at the time. And then I can even recall the day when they first installed the metal detectors. And I mean, no kids were aware, students weren't aware that when they came to school that day, it was going to be metal detectors. If you would have seen the number of kids that turned around and ran back away from the building, dropping razor blades, knives, pagers, everything you can imagine littered that parking lot as they were on their way through the metal detector. So, I mean, it definitely had its share of challenges. And I mean, did you
say that there were 18-year-olds in middle school at that time?
That is correct. There were 18-year-old students who have repeated 2 and 3 times at that time. In fact, I think one year Mr. Jolly and Mr. Shamley talked together, actually dealing with an overage unit, just to try to curtail some of that, and and contain it in one area in the building, so that so we can have instruction, in the rest of the building. Mm-hmm. We tried a lot of different models, and I will say, in Audubon over time, we did at one point we were very successful. I remember a period where we had a waiting list for kids to get into Audubon, so we were able to turn it around. I will say that, but in the beginning, it was rough.
And did you also say that there were metal detectors placed in this school where you also had kindergartners coming to the same building, and that kids who were coming to this school were dropping contraband in the parking lot or just turning away, not going to school because they did not want to be caught with the stuff that they had in their pockets?
Now, I don't think the kindergartners were in the building yet. At that time, it was 6 through 8. So they changed the model after that to cut down on some of the, the chaos and the confusion that was going on in the building, to restore order to the building. Mm-hmm. So the K-8 model was effective in that regards because, you divided up. You no longer had high schools fighting against other high schools. Or middle schools fighting against other middle schools. I know Nathan Hill used to walk down the street because they got on a half hour before Audubon. So they would their whole school would be outside by the time the kids are ready to get dismissed. So at that point, you had to have the 4th District Police Department come out there to help clear that out.
A whole school was there to fight another whole school?
That's how it was, and that's how it was in the beginning. Yes, it was, indeed. That's what we were looking at. Kids they got out earlier, the principal would call and say, hey, they're on their way, and we had to deal with that.
Right.
So, which was another reason why I wanted some people there I knew who would, if it got ugly, could back me up.
What did you think about the parent-teacher relationship at that time? What was it like? Was there a strong relationship between the parents and teachers in that community when you guys first got started?
I think for certain teachers, that had been there a while, I think they had established certain relationships in the community. I know, I really don't want to call teachers by name, but I know there were several that were there who had established good relationships, I think, because they had the parents in their class at one point. So there were some existing relationships. Was it real strong at the time? I want to say you had maybe half of the parents that, were really active and the other half were not, or you didn't know who they were. You never saw them the whole time their kids went to school. And the parent piece is important because you need that in order to turn a school around. It takes a village to raise a child. So we had to get everybody on the same page.
Right. And so were you guys having to be responsible for getting young people to pass any sort of a proficiency test or a regent test, anything like that?
Yes, we did have proficiency at the time. And in the beginning, I think it was geared primarily towards 4th and 6th grade in the beginning. So 4th grade, they had a test and 6th graders had a test. The lower grades, I think, had a test once they, I can't remember what their testing was. If it was like a CAT test or something else, but I know as far as the state testing, it was the proficiency test in 4th and 6th grade. And we did get that turned around and have some successes in 4th and 6th grade. Principals were strategic and what teachers they put in what grades to make sure, we got the success that we needed. Mm-hmm. So that's how we
and what would you say was the hardest challenge when it came to educating children who were possibly behind in reading, writing, and science? Was that the case? Were there children who were behind in basic reading, writing, and science and math and stuff like that?
Yeah, that definitely was the case. The good thing about science is, which makes it a little bit easier than the other subjects, is you're given facts. And often what you find a lot of times is in the lower grades, they really focus a lot on math and reading. So when I got kids when the kids come to me in science, I always feel like we're always in the same starting point because a lot of them haven't had that much exposure. So for me, it's a little bit easier because, science is facts a lot of times. And once they get the facts, even if you have to memorize something, if you have to memorize what volume is, guess what? They know what volume is. So it's a little bit different. Whereas in math, you can change one or two numbers, and you can throw somebody completely off. And reading, all you have to do is change the story. So science is more of recalling the facts, whereas the math and the reading is going to require that they, go a step further, and really know how to use that skill. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference there. Were there kids that were behind? Definitely. There was definitely a gap. There were kids who struggled with reading. And I will say this, over the years, the district has really gotten a lot better at addressing the needs, for kids that are farther behind. It's not perfect, but I mean, we are seeing progress. We're seeing definite progress now. We do a lot more of the small group instruction now. So, you got 3 or 4 kids in front of you. So you don't get those kids that can hide, like in the background in a class of 25 or 30 kids. The 1 or 2 kids that may put their head down and become disengaged. We keep them more in small groups now and kind of rotate them to make sure everybody, is got you had their attention at least undivided for 25 or 30 minutes out of each class period. So I have seen some dramatic improvements in instruction in the district over the years. I can't say that.
Right. And so, what would you say to a young teacher out there who is just getting into the field and they're trying to figure out, how to dig deep? What would be your advice to a new teacher out there?
Number one, you can't take the job unless you care for real. And then you got to realize you got to go above and beyond what the job description is. I used to do things, and I don't know if you remember, but I used to go to even the kids' houses, sometimes just hang out, play a game of Madden with them or something. You got to really be invested in the community. Kids love when you show up on a Saturday to see them playing, their beauty league football. You show an interest in the kid as a person, not just as a student. And that's when you can get somebody, you can get them in, you can get somebody to run through a brick wall for you then.
Right.
So, right. And then another thing is, being at the school is predominantly, the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, the East Side is predominantly African American. What's missing really is that component where they understand what it's like being an African American, the struggle, things that people have went through over the years to put you in the position, because each generation should do better than the last. I can even think back to my mother and father. My father grew up on a farm. My grandfather was a sharecropper. So my father went off to college, and I mean, he went off with nothing. So imagine, even if you take yourself back, Cedric, to 18, imagine just walking out the door and you don't know how you're going to eat the next day. You just say, hey, I'm going to school. I'm going to fill out this application. I'm going to pick up a job in the cafeteria, which is what he did. And, he cleaned his clothes every day like in the sink. I mean, he was down south, so it wasn't cold, but he was actually outside in the elements. Right. He was very fortunate that he had phys ed as one of his classes as a freshman. My father could play basketball, he could play baseball. He ended up getting discovered in phys ed class while he washing his clothes every day in his sink. And they ended up offering him a partial scholarship to help get him through college. But he walked off from the farm. My grandfather told him, I don't have any money for you. You know what I'm saying? I don't have anything. My father said, don't worry about it. I'm going to figure it out. And that's what he did. That's why it was so important for me, because when it was time for me to go to college, my father was paying my tuition for me. And I looked at it as this is going to be a disgrace for me not to graduate from college when you had that kind of sacrifice. Same thing with my mother. My mother grew up down on Outlet, on 55th down there. And again, not a very affluent family. She took a different technique in order to get her scholarship through school, which was she went strictly academics. She ended up with a full ride to Wilberforce. So that's where she went to college. So that's another thing that I would think would be important. You have to be able to look at your students and really believe in them. I believe that you all could do it because I had examples ahead of me who had done it. So I knew you could rise from anything. You just need somebody to believe in it. If your teacher doesn't believe in you, they're not going to push you because guess what? They don't think you can do it anyway. So you got to believe in the kids. You got to care about the kids. This is my legacy. I'm getting to the end of my career now. I had you 20 years ago. So this is getting, to the point where when it's time for me to pass on, I'm going to think back to what did I do? Did I make a difference? Did I help anybody? I know in high school, that was our motto, go mad. That's what the principal used to tell us. And that meant make a difference. And so as we go out here into the world, go mad. And so I look and I got on Facebook, and as you know, I don't do a lot of posting, but I do keep up with what you all are doing. And nothing makes me happier than when I see you guys having some success. When I see y'all taking care of y'all families, traveling around the world, doing what y'all doing. Nothing makes me happier. When I walk into a hospital or into a business and there one of you all are standing behind the counter, and a lot of times I do hear the, thanks, Mr. Harvey, you made a difference. I remember going to pick up prescriptions for my mother. At the time, the young lady was just a farm tech, but she was like, Mr. Harvey, I'm here because what you did really made a difference. I think even one of your classmates is teaching in the district now. He's teaching in Deer Morgan, and he said the experience that he had. He actually asked me, do I still do all the things that I did when he was a student there at Audubon? So, because he remembered that, it made a difference, and I'm glad to see him successful now. He's teaching, and he can take care of his family now.
Right. What you're saying, it goes directly in line with what our audience is thinking, and I want to take another question from the audience at this time. Corinne Riley says, what is your greatest motivation as a teacher?
One thing, man, often this idea exists that kids in inner city schools underachieve. My push every year is for my kids to score with kids in the rest of the state, at least at the proficient level, but I'll constantly push them and tell them that's the minimum. I know if you look at the results, because I'm in Kenneth Clement now, so if you look at the results, even if you look at 8th grade science for Kenneth Clement, you go back, you look on the state report card, you'll see that their number average for the class is 712. 700 is proficient. So all the students together, their average was 712. The state average was 719. So I'm pushing them like, hey, no matter where you go, no matter who you have in high school, I want you to be in a position where you can compete. And, the kids from the school that I am at, they go off, they go to Benedictine, they go to St. Ed's, they go to John Hay. They really feel John Hay, which is a great choice, for students going to high school, because Cleveland, is offering college tuition for kids that remain in the district and graduate from a Cleveland Metropolitan School District. So I definitely, if I had a student that was in Cleveland Public Schools, I definitely would make sure they would graduate, and I probably would send them to John Hay, because of course you got the grade point average requirements to get in, and they're going to be in a good environment and they're going to push one another. If you look at the state report card for John Hay is scoring, they excel.
Right.
So,
ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Jesse Harvey right now, and he's truly, truly a legendary educator out of the Cleveland metropolitan area, and hundreds of students can attest to the fact that he's gone above and beyond to make sure that you're getting to the next level. But we're not done talking to Mr. Harvey about his journey, his experience, and his expertise. We are going to continue to delve into what he did right after this brief message. We'll be right back with Jesse Harvey. America's Next Motivator, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by Cedric Riley and sponsored by our good friends over at 4D Healthware. And we're back. Now, Mr. Harvey, I would like to know, Jesse Harvey, rather, how did you keep coming back day after day after day? Weren't those classrooms full? What was the ratio versus the reality in your early days at Audubon?
Average class size was probably 30 to 1. But I will say,
what does that mean?
30 students in the classroom to one teacher was pretty much the average class size. And in the event, if you had teachers absent and there weren't subs available, you may have to double up where you had to put another class or half of that class or a portion of that class in there with your classroom. So there definitely were very large classes where you had 30, maybe even 40 kids in your classroom at a time.
40 kids.
That's correct. 40 kids. So, and I looked at it and I used to tell kids, I don't care if it's one kid in here or 300. Because I mean, you go to a college campus and guess what? You got 300 kids in the classroom with one teacher. I let them know we were here, we about business, let's get it done. And kids really, they bought into that. You know, I think they respected it. They would come in and I mean, you will see a large number of kids in there. I'm not gonna say it was perfectly quiet and everybody was an angel, but it was still an environment where learning could take place.
Mhm.
And so, and you know, I want to commend, you know, the kids of Cleveland Metropolitan School District for that, because they could have took advantage of that situation. But I know at Audubon, one thing I can say about the kids that were there, and particularly at AJ Rickoff, because that's where I had boys and girls, because Kenneth Clement is all boys. But I know everybody kind of took pride really in coming to school and what they were learning. You know, they cared. They cared. And that made me care even more because I knew it meant something. What I was doing meant something to these kids.
Right, but what I also would like to speak to is how you set a certain type of tone in the beginning, meaning on the first day in your class, you set a tone by introducing yourself, using humor, using charisma, but being strict and firm about what you were there to do. How does it feel to be one teacher, you know, in a hallway out of 15 teachers, you might be one out of 2 or 3 teachers that the children are actually gravitating to and listening to. A lot of the other teachers are not getting the same results. How does it feel to be a central figure and you're only teaching one subject?
Yeah, I mean, I understand exactly where you're coming from. You know, I wish I could have done more, but I mean, of course, I only can be responsible for one subject at a time. But I took it with a sense of pride. I mean, I knew you guys. What I didn't want to see happen to you guys. I didn't want you to not have the opportunity to go to college. I get in middle school, you might not have made up your mind yet whether you want to go to college or whether you want to go into a trade or whatever you want to do. I wanted to convince you guys, hey, make sure the door is not closed. When you get into high school, if you may change your mind and say, you know what, I want to go to college now. I wanted to make sure you were prepared and that option was still open for you. And so that's what I spent a lot of times. You know I told my story. I know you remember me telling this story. But I told the story all the time about, you know, being prepared. Don't put off until, you know, tomorrow what you can do today, which is biblical, you know. And actually speaking, even if you go into biblical terms, we should be establishing enough wealth, not only for our children, but for our children's children. You know, that's really our charge and what we should be doing. And it all starts with getting yourself an education. You got to get yourself something where what you do is respected. Everyone can't do it because laws of supply and demand. If you got a skill that no one else can do, they're gonna pay you for it. And then I wanted you guys also to just to be men. You know, I wanted my men to know how to be men and lead families. I wanted the young ladies to grow up, you know, and take care of their children. And so we can build a better community because y'all the future. You know, I'm about to drift off into the sunset and sit on the porch drinking country time lemonade. So it's on you all now. You know, I'm glad to see what you've been doing. I've been watching, I've been following, you know, I see the posts. And I mean, that's what makes me happy. I'm y'all biggest fan now.
Right,
So,
right. And you know, it goes to show the types of conversations that you were having in a science class, but you're teaching people how to become adults. And that's what makes the difference between, let's say, your class and maybe some other classes where that might not have been the case. And so, you know, it becomes about consistency, and it becomes about your sense of identity and it being wholesome and you being able to rub that identity off to some degree on the students that you're working with. And the kids can see a difference in that.
right. I mean, yeah, kids really, a lot of kids bought into it. There's a lot of success stories that I see now. You know, not all stories, of course, ended up in a success story, but I do definitely feel like I have had some impact on a lot of kids, you know, who have come through the schools. So.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And so what do you think we need to do as a collective to make sure that even more young people can have a successful outcome in Cleveland public schools?
Well, I think parents need to have real conversations with their kids. Put bills on the table. Let them understand how much things cost. I remember going over this, with a class, a group of kids, and they were talking about, I can have this type of job. I'll make, maybe $8 or $9 an hour, and that's going to be plenty. If I'm making $11 an hour, I'm doing good. And so I know I used to go to the chalkboard back in the day, and I'll just put some figures up there. Hey, the lights are this much. The gas bill is this much. And I mean, the other thing is, some respect and pride in your family. I know a lot of our families are fractured now. Where you got single parent homes, or you have a father that may have been even murdered in a lot of cases. Because I know I had a lot of students where their father was gone because he was, he had been killed. But you gotta, keep the family togetherness. I don't know how many people still having family reunions. I don't see a lot of Facebook posts about a whole bunch of family reunions. I see people maybe with the person they with going on vacation. But I mean, you gotta really keep track of, the older generations, listen to their stories. And then the older generations also need to realize you gotta invest in the younger generation. Because one day you're gonna depend on them again. Bible says what? Once a man, twice a child. So you have to realize, hey, everybody has their time on top. You never abuse anybody. You don't take advantage of anybody, because one day that might be the very person that has to, lend you a hand. My mother, she was just in the hospital recently, and the young lady who was in the room with her actually turned out to be one of my daughter's friends from high school. And I was glad, that she was in there. And then I was glad also the way my daughter conducted herself in high school, because I knew it wasn't going to translate into any type of animosity or anything towards my mother. And so, you have to always be conscious of that you're not always going to be on top. You up there for a while, but don't step on people to get to the top, and carry as many people to the top with you as you can. It shouldn't be a thing where we got this animosity towards each other, where you mad because somebody was successful. They made it out of the hood or whatever. Pull as many people as you can with you, and everybody needs to really work together. And I mean, that's what I would like to see happen more so in the community. When I was a kid, even some of the younger kids in the street, I would sit them down on the porch and teach them some of the things I was learning. I was a sixth grader, sitting down with like a little group of second graders and third graders, trying to teach them the things that I learned in school. So, and I know I had a big impact on my younger brother, because I mean, now he's a chemical engineer. I mean, so the science that I knew being 3 or 4 years ahead of him, I started showing him earlier. So when he got to, sixth grade, he was already familiar with that content. He was able to excel further than me. And that's my hope, for each one of you all to do better. And I know you remember me saying this. I used to say, don't be like me, be better than me. Be better than me. I haven't lived a perfect life. I done made mistakes. And I tried to be open and frank with you guys about the mistakes that I made, so y'all don't make the same mistakes. And so, it takes a lot of care, it takes a lot of love, and it takes community. And we got too much of people closing their doors now, where they don't even know who their neighbor is. They don't talk to them. I remember as a kid, I would get snatched up. I would take Mr. Jolly, for example. I was acting a fool in Randall Park Mall one day. And his mom was the one that brought me home to my mother. Like, yeah, I saw your son, up in the mall. He was doing this and that. So I'm bringing him back home to you. And this is what he did. And, that makes a difference. I remember, getting in trouble by Mr. Shambley's father. And I mean, by getting in trouble, I mean, you might have went ahead, you might have got yourself yanked up. I mean, and it wasn't a sense of, don't put your hands on my kids and blah, blah, blah. It was a community. But the reason why that respect existed was because the adults in the neighborhood talked to each other as well. They knew who their neighbor was. It wasn't a stranger that was grabbing your kid. It was somebody you had built a relationship with. You had broke bread with. You didn't talk to, on a regular basis. And I mean, that makes a big difference in a community.
And so our community has some work to do. And as we listen to you, we're getting some tips and advice on what it might take to make our community even stronger. And so pretty much when somebody says there's no hope for these kids, Ain't nobody gonna be able to get to these kids. These kids are a lost cause. You don't buy into that, do you?
I don't believe it one bit. Remember, that was the first thing I said you need to be a successful teacher. You got to believe. You know, Walter Dean Myers, if you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win, but you think you can't, it's almost certain you won't. Life's battles aren't always won by the stronger or faster man. But sooner or later, the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. So it all starts with believing in yourself, and then you put in the work. Yeah, you're only one person. I get that. Try to link up with one more person. If each person gravitates and grabs one more person in that chain, hey, eventually, guess what? You got the whole neighborhood locked up. And so, but I mean, it takes us coming out of our houses, and I understand some of the challenges in Cleveland. They are challenges that were different in the neighborhood that I grew up in. I know there are some parents that are, in the household by themselves, and I know they're working 2 jobs. Well, that's why it's so important you got that relationship with the neighbor. Because like I said in the story a minute ago, Miss Jolly grabbed me out of Randall Park Mall. My mother wasn't there to see me. It was the neighbor who saw me. And that comes from, really building up a community. So
let me ask you something. It sounds like even today, everybody's trying to figure out how to do more than just be a teacher in order to be effective in the space of school. Do you think that there needs to be like another element in school? I noticed that they removed home ec classes, and they removed a lot of other resources, and we'll talk about that in a second. But do you think that there needs to be like one more element in school, like one more almost rites of passage type of element that's solely dedicated to help young men become men and get their mind right, and young ladies become actual women and get their minds right? Do you think school needs to be more than just academics? Talk about that.
I mean, definitely. I mean, they are starting to address that too in the district. I know personally, I wanted to at one point, and I have done it. It wasn't necessarily in the curriculum, but I went ahead and showed students, how to balance out a checkbook. I showed them the pitfalls of, getting a credit card and what the interest rate looks like and what happens when you make the minimum payment. I have shown kids, how to do drywall, how to put in electrical, how to frame, how to put up a wall in your house, how to put down ceramic tile. I mean, everybody is not necessarily going to want to go to a 4-year school. And I understand that, but pick up a trade or something like that, so you can be successful. I mean, it's a lot of things you can do. One of them, something I think is great is if you go into HVAC, you go into heating and cooling, or even better yet, being an electrician. Electricians make good money, and you got to carry around a couple of light switches and a little bit of wire. Being a carpenter is a little more work because you got to carry that ceramic tile, you got to carry the drywall. That's gonna have some wear and tear on your body. But electrical work, hey, that's not a bad avenue to go in, and there's not enough exposure, for kids these days. When I was in high school at Warrensville, kids went to Cleveland Heights to go take Autobahn, learn how to work on cars so they could be mechanics. I know Warrensville, we had a planetarium at the time, for kids that was interested in that type of thing. They had an electrical program. So I got some friends now that's working for AT&T because that electrical program was there. They had, graphing, learning how to graph and design. And so, that led to certain people becoming architects. So you definitely need to, because everybody got a skill set. It's just about taking the time to invest in them, to let them develop that skill, and making sure they got opportunities and exposure. Because there's other jobs out here that a lot of times kids in the inner city don't even know exists. And that's a big piece of it. I was talking to a guy not too long ago where he's looking for kids basically at 15 years old that's willing to give up their summers. And what he has them doing is learning how to fly drones. Now, it's important because, those drones, of course, might be $100,000 drone that they're going to end up flying eventually. But the money they can make, you're talking about no college degree. At 18 years old, you might have a salary of $110,000 or $115,000 a year. But he's not looking for kids that come to him at 18. He's looking for kids. He's looking for a certain type of character. So he's looking for the kids that's willing to give up their summers for very little pay, in like the 8th grade. then come back in the 9th grade, then come back in the 10th grade. Because see, what you're doing is you're showing him that you really, first of all, are dedicated to it. It's something that you want to do. And you build that trust up in that relationship with the person. That's your networking right there. When I got hired in the district, actually, the person who interviewed me, when I put in a recommendation, the recommendation letter came from his boss. So, and it was all because my mother at the time was teaching, and I would go in at the end of the school year and help her clean out her room. Of course, the teacher next door, if she needed help, she would ask, hey, can you carry some books down for me? And I mean, I could have complained, and moaned and groaned about it, but guess what? I would have paid for that later on because they would have remembered that attitude. But because I had an attitude, because I had went in and helped, when she looked at me later on, she was like, oh yeah, that's somebody definitely. So, the relationships you build and the attitude you have when you're young, you never know who the person is that you across from.
Right.
I had no idea, when my daughter was coming in from high school, that one day, one of her friends might be the nurse that's going in there, to see to me, to check my blood pressure or something like that. So you never know who the person is going to grow up to be.
That's right. I also want you to address how did it feel when the budget cuts resulted in no more music and was gym scaled back as well? And how did that impact you guys?
I think what happened in that year when they had the budget cuts and they removed the specials, I think class size ballooned up to like maybe close to 40 to 1 on a regular basis, and you had classes back to back to back, and I believe they had early dismissal. So instead of having specials, they had all their classes, and then they had like lunch at the end of the day, and then left, I think, the building at like 1 o'clock. And it had a definite negative impact. You have more kids in the classroom, you got more behaviors to deal with. You got more issues, to manage. And then kids that need that individual help, it's hard to get to 40 different kids to help them. Even if you break them into groups, if you got a group of 6 kids in front of you, well, you still got to keep an eye now on 34 other kids and hope that they will invest in their learning on their own. And so you counting on kids really to almost be young adults and monitor their own behavior. And they will do it to an extent. But I mean, being realistic, how many kids in the 6th or 7th grade are really just gonna come to school and be like, okay, I'm here to work every day? Because they come also to socialize. That's an important part of school. And so you have to teach kids also about time management, and not wasting your time. I look back at my years in elementary school and I wish I would have done more. Hindsight, I wish I would have done more. I wish I would have worked harder. And I got to the point where I have a master's degree. So I'm still reading now. And at this point in my life, I'm really looking at what my big focus is and direction is now is I'm looking at health and longevity, because that's another problem that we have in the Black community. We got poor diet, and the poor diet leads to a lot of times challenges in the classroom. So, for example, lactose intolerant. So a lot of African Americans are lactose intolerant. Well, they get milk for breakfast. They get milk for lunch. And then you have kids who now their head is down that last half of the school day because their stomach hurts, And then what are they eating? Are they eating green vegetables at all? And so now you're getting other type of illnesses that might keep them out of school. So diet is important. And I mean, you owe it not only to yourself, but you owe it to your kids, so your kids don't have the struggle on their shoulders at an early age, helping making sure that you okay every day. So they can, raise their kids also. So diet is important. I mean, we really got to look at health too in the Black community. But I understand the foods that are unhealthy are a whole lot cheaper. So
right. And a lot of people are dealing with food deserts in areas like Cleveland. And so you're dealing with children who they develop attention disorders and they develop an inability to be consistent when it comes to their schoolwork. But you've got to fight through that every single day. You come in there and you find ways to get these kids to myelinate around the subjects that you're teaching, and that's an incredible feat. Now, I want to know how what would you say has been your biggest what's been your most successful strategy when it comes to getting your lessons to stick?
Number one, you never quit. You come in and you teach from bell to bell every day. You know, you come in and you're tired. You know, you don't take days off. You go home and you think about ways. You know, I know with you guys a lot of times. I always put you guys in a story. I would always tell a story, and in the story, I always won in the stories. If I remember right, I always won in the stories. But I put you guys in the story. So I always gave you something that you can relate to, though. So therefore, when you was thinking of that concept, when you see kids' eyes roll up to that corner in the ceiling, you know, they remembering a story that you told them that day or something that they seen. And, you know, big is hands-on experience. You know, what are they learning by doing things with their hands? Because you remember that. So those are the most important things to get stuff to stick with kids. And then kids, you got to get them to invest time at home, too, outside of the school day. You know, outside of the school day. So I would definitely say teach through stories, have hands-on experience, have stories that they can relate to, you know, and like I said, I used to keep you guys hooked because I would always throw you in the story. So
and so what we're gonna get a book from you.
You know, I right now I invest so much energy in the classroom with the students, you know, like even through the summertime, I'm already thinking about what can I do to push these kids past this, you know, where other kids are in the state. Because I always try to push them and make them realize we competing against Solon, we competing against Hudson, we competing against Beechwood, and I keep that on their minds. And so a lot of times in the summer, I'm already looking at the next school year and trying to figure out what I can do to get them ready for the next school year. Sitting down and having that time to write it probably won't be until I'm retired. Because right now, I got to put all my energy into what I'm doing. So finally got my kids up and grown and off to college. So now I can definitely dig in a whole lot deeper without getting the interruptions in the middle of nights or somebody need the table because they got to do this or got to do that. So my focus is on, you know, making sure kids are prepared. I spend all my time on that.
I have a question real quick. Does Common Core exist as a philosophy in what you do, and how might that be affecting everybody's teaching situation? Common Core.
Well, Common Core, you know, you got some states that are for it, some states that are against it. But I mean, you have state objectives that all kids need to be able, that need to have a certain mastery of in order to pass the, you know, the Ohio State test. Mm-hmm. So I do definitely look at the Common Core, and then our district has a well outlined. I'll say the science curriculum in Cleveland is excellent. I'm gonna say that honestly. The curriculum that we have going now is an excellent curriculum. It's digital. It has a digital platform to it, so kids can work through things digitally. They can watch videos and stuff even while I guess that's the technology era. But they can watch videos and everything while they're at home. But the curriculum is set up so well, you know, as far as highlighting what the question is, what the big idea is, and all the supporting details that go with it, and the steps in those supporting details. So I know the science curriculum in Cleveland Metropolitan School District, I'm gonna speak specifically to middle school, you know, is outstanding. So,
are you confident that the team that you're a part of and the efforts that you're leading are going to be effective for the youth of Cleveland through the COVID-19 pandemic?
The COVID-19 pandemic, it worries me because I'm not sure if we even gonna be in the classroom all the time. You know, this is a big concern that we have. I was able to motivate kids while we were out, you know, to go online and, you know, to complete assignments. Mm-hmm. But when they needed that one-on-one instruction, there's not enough hours in the day for all of them, because, you know, I kept an open phone line where kids could call me, and I didn't set up office hours. I said, you know, anytime you need to call me, just call me. But it's definitely going to be a challenge if we're not in a, you know, brick and mortar school. The virtual learning poses a lot of challenges. We had technology issues to overcome. And I mean, I want to give credit to, CEO Gordon, because, he went out and purchased laptops and made sure kids had access to mobile hotspots and tried to close in those gaps. Matter of fact, I think he even went as far as giving all high school students a laptop to make sure they could continue to work. Some families, of course, had the difficulty of, 4 or 5 kids in a household. And the district, of course, was not going to provide 5 computers. So they had to share, so that was a challenge, because you might have a kid where you assign something on Monday and they would tell you, well, I can't get to it till Saturday. And so, you had to have a little flexibility. You got to have some compassion, in what you're doing.
Mr. Harvey, Jesse Harvey, this has been a great conversation with you today. We got about 2 minutes before we need to wrap up. I just want to show you something, and then I want to ask you 3 questions that I'm going to need you to answer quickly. All right.
All right.
First is this. You see this? This is from the probably like 1950 or 1960 from Audubon Middle School.
Okay.
This was a school newspaper from Audubon in the year 1946.
Okay.
And so, this level of history is something that you've been a part of decades and decades and decades of educating our children. I got 3 questions for you as we wrap up. I need you to answer real quick. What is survival to you?
Survival is having the basic needs, meeting your basic needs to live out here, making sure you got a roof over your head, making sure you got food in your stomach, making sure you got a place to sleep, the basic things you need to even be successful. You need a good night's sleep to be successful.
What is success to you?
To me, success is you being able to take care of your family, being able to spend time with them, being able to take your kids, on a vacation. When I was a kid, what I wanted to do when I grew up, I said, I just wanted to make sure I didn't take a step back in my family. My mother was a teacher. My father was a teacher. My father had his master's degree. I wanted to make sure I didn't take a step backwards. So I think each generation should take one more step forward, because the opportunities get a little bit better because the foundation is better. I didn't have to pick cotton on a farm. My father had taken care of that already and provided, like I said, when it was time for me to go to school, he just said, here, go. Here's the money. I'm going to take care of it.
Right. Mr. Harvey, I would like to respect you today. I want to give you a crown today, let you know that your work has been recognized, has been noted, and we've appreciated it. We continue to appreciate it. And we send you positive vibes for the work that you continue to do. You are a very valiant person, and you decided to take it upon yourself to do 3 or 4 or 5 jobs to make sure that we are successful in the community. And you, Mr. Harvey, are one of America's next motivators. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cedric, man. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care, man.
All right.